On a bitterly cold winter day in Montana, a 4-year-old boy sat alone on a park bench, snow clinging to his small shoulders. Beside him, a German shepherd snuggled close, sharing the last vestiges of warmth. Minutes before, a luxury car had sped away, leaving behind a promise never to return. No witnesses, no second chance. As the storm engulfed the park, the boy's breathing slowed, and the dog refused to leave, even as the cold began to intensify. What neither of them knew was that somewhere nearby, a man haunted by war was running through the snow, unaware that fate held a life in his hands. This is not just a story of abandonment. It is a story of loyalty, faith, and the moment a choice becomes a miracle. Stay with us, watch until the end, and if this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel for more similar stories. Snow fell thick and soundless over a forgotten park on the outskirts of Montana, where winter pressed down on stone, iron, and breath alike, turning time itself slow and merciless. Ethan Miller sat curled on a concrete bench, dusted white, his small body hunched inward as if trying to disappear into his own ribs. At 4 years old, he was painfully thin, the kind of thin that came not from illness alone, but from long stretches of quiet hunger and uncertainty. His knees barely reached the edge of the bench, boots too large for his feet dangling uselessly above the frozen ground. A faded navy coat swallowed his frame, sleeves hanging past his hands, the zipper broken so it gaped open despite his best effort to pull it closed. His cheeks were pale beneath the cold, lips tinged faintly blue, and his dark lashes were already crusted with melting snow. Ethan had the solemn face of a child who had learned, far too early, that crying did not always bring help. His eyes, large, brown, and watchful, kept drifting toward the path that led out of the park, searching for a shape that no longer came. Pressed tightly against his chest was Rex, a young German shepherd not yet fully grown, perhaps 8 or 9 months old. All long legs and oversized paws that promised strength he had not yet learned to use. Rex's coat was the classic black and tan, though the colors were muted now beneath clinging snow and frost. His ears, still a little too big for his head, twitched at every distant sound, but he did not pull away or fidget. Instead, he leaned into Ethan with deliberate care, as if aware that the warmth of his body mattered more than his own comfort. His breath came fast and shallow, fogging the air between them, and his dark eyes never left the boy's face. Rex had been restless by nature, curious, energetic, always tugging at the leash, but the cold had quieted him into something older, something closer to vigilance than fear. The park around them felt abandoned by the world. Snow-covered swings creaked faintly in the wind, their chains stiff with ice. A metal trash bin rattled now and then, hollow and lonely. Footprints that might have meant people had already softened and vanished, erased by the steady fall. There were no cars, no voices, no laughter, only the whisper of snow brushing against stone and the low moan of wind threading through bare trees. The city felt impossibly far away, as if this park existed outside of time, reserved only for those who had nowhere else to go. Ethan shifted slightly, wincing as cold seeped through his clothes and into his bones. His fingers, stiff and red, tightened in Rex's fur, burying themselves beneath the thick undercoat where a little warmth still lived. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice hoarse and barely louder than the wind. He was not sure if he was speaking to the dog or to himself. He said he'd be back." The words sounded thin even to his own ears. He had repeated them many times already, each time with less certainty than before. His father's car had disappeared down the road minutes ago, or maybe longer. Ethan had lost track of time once the cold began to bite. His father, Thomas Miller, was a man who looked impressive to strangers. Tall, well-dressed, always clean-shaven, his silver watch catching the light whenever he gestured. He spoke smoothly, confidently, the way men did when they were used to being obeyed. To the world, Thomas was successful, controlled, admired. To Ethan, he was distant, impatient, a presence that filled rooms without ever warming them. His temper was never explosive, only sharp and precise, cutting in small ways that left no visible marks. When Thomas said he would be gone just a few minutes, his tone carried the expectation of trust, not because he had earned it, but because he demanded it. Ethan remembered watching his father walk away across the park path, shoes untouched by snow, phone pressed to his ear, his back already turned. No hug, no instructions beyond, "Stay here." Rex had growled softly then, a low sound in his chest, but Ethan had shushed him, afraid of making his father angry. Now that memory sat heavy in Ethan's stomach, mixing with the cold until he felt hollow all the way through. Rex lifted his head and licked Ethan's chin. A quick, rough swipe meant more to reassure than to clean. The boy gave a faint smile, barely visible. Rex had been with him for only a short time, gifted suddenly, unexpectedly, as if meant to solve a problem rather than join a family. But from the first night, the dog had slept pressed against Ethan's side, breathing in rhythm with him. Rex did not understand promises or wealth or abandonment. He understood closeness, he understood staying. The wind picked up, pushing snow sideways now, and Ethan shuddered. His thoughts grew slower, fuzzier, drifting in and out like weak radio signals. He wondered vaguely if this was what falling asleep felt like. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to just rest his eyes for a moment. But each time his lids drooped, Rex nudged him, whining softly, paws shifting as if urging him to move, to stay awake. The dog's instincts, untrained but fierce, recognized danger long before Ethan could name it. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the numbness and fear, a fragile question formed in Ethan's mind. Had he done something wrong? Children often believe the world bent around their actions, and Ethan was no different. Maybe he hadn't been quiet enough. Maybe he'd asked too many questions. Maybe this cold bench was the consequence of something he could not remember doing. The thought hurt more than the cold, settling like a stone in his chest. Snow continued to fall, heavier now, piling on Ethan's shoulders and Rex's back, turning them slowly into part of the landscape. Minutes stretched thin and fragile, easily torn apart by the storm. The park remained empty, the path still bare of footsteps. Returning, and on that frozen bench, a small boy and a young dog clung to each other, waiting for a promise already lost to winter. Ethan did not cry as the storm deepened around him. Crying had once been his instinct, but instinct had learned caution, and caution had hardened into silence. He sat still on the frozen bench, his small body trembling in shallow, involuntary shivers, whispering softly to Rex as if the dog were the only thing anchoring him to the world. His words were simple, broken fragments, half-remembered reassurances, phrases borrowed from adults he had overheard before, spoken not because he believed them, but because saying nothing felt too close to disappearing. Rex pressed tighter against him, his young frame tense with effort, muscles quivering as he tried to shield Ethan from the wind. The dog's brown eyes, dark and steady, tracked every swirl of snow, every distant sound, alert yet unwavering, like a silent oath made without language. The snow thickened, layering itself over the bench, creeping up Ethan's boots and clinging to Rex's fur in icy clumps. Time stretched into something cruel and abstract. Ethan no longer knew how long he had been waiting. Minutes blurred together, indistinguishable from one another. He rubbed his numb hands together, then tucked them under Rex's chest, where the dog's warmth was strongest. His fingers barely moved now, joints stiff and aching, and the cold had begun to crawl inward, dulling sensation and thought alike. His breathing slowed, each inhale shallow, each exhale a faint cloud that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. In his mind, fragments of memory surfaced without order. His father's voice, clipped and impatient. The shine of polished shoes stepping away, the words soon, spoken carelessly, without weight. Ethan did not understand why that word felt like a lie now. He only knew that the space his father had left behind felt vast and final, like a door closed too quietly to hear. He tried to picture the car returning, headlights cutting through the snow, but the image dissolved every time he grasped it. The path remained empty, swallowed by white. Rex whimpered softly, sensing the boy's fading awareness. He nudged Ethan's cheek with his nose, then licked it, rough tongue scraping against cold skin. When that failed to draw a response, Rex shifted his body, awkwardly repositioning his long legs to wrap more closely around Ethan's torso. He was still a young dog, untrained, unfamiliar with commands or structured rescue work, but something older than training stirred in him now. His instincts screamed that stillness was dangerous. He pawed lightly at Ethan's coat, then pressed his forehead against the boy's chest, listening to the faint, uneven rhythm of his heartbeat. Ethan stirred, eyelids fluttering. "He'll come back," he murmured again, though the words sounded distant even to him. His thoughts had begun to drift, edges softening, the cold offering a deceptive sense of calm. He felt heavy, as though the snow itself were pulling him downward, inviting him to rest. Somewhere, deep inside, a quiet fear flickered, not sharp enough to panic, but persistent enough to hurt. What if this bench was the last place he ever sat? The question floated through his mind without fully forming, then slipped away, replaced by numbness. Far beyond the park, in the warmth of the city, Thomas Miller moved through his evening without interruption. He dined beneath soft lights, his tailored coat hung neatly by the door, snow brushed from his shoulders by someone else's hands. His phone buzzed occasionally, messages and calls blending into background noise he scarcely noticed. The thought of the park, of the small figure he had left behind, did not intrude. If it did, he pushed it aside with practiced ease. Responsibility had always been something he delegated or delayed, never something he carried. He told himself vaguely that everything would sort itself out, that problems tended to do so when ignored long enough. Back in the park, the wind shifted, cutting harder through the trees. Rex lifted his head and let out a low bark, more plea than warning. Its sound quickly swallowed by the storm. No one answered. The park remained empty, indifferent. Snow piled higher, erasing the last faint outlines of the path. Rex's legs began to tremble with exhaustion, but he did not pull away. Instead, he leaned more fully into Ethan, sacrificing his own comfort for the boy's fragile warmth. His breath came faster now, chest heaving, but his eyes stayed fixed on Ethan's face, searching for any sign of movement. Ethan's head lolled slightly to one side, chin resting against Rex's shoulder. His lashes fluttered, then stilled. For a terrifying moment, Rex froze, heart pounding. He nudged Ethan again, more urgently this time, whining softly. Ethan stirred just enough to sigh, a faint sound that reassured Rex without truly waking the boy. Still, something had changed. The boy's skin felt colder, his breathing slower. Rex sensed it without understanding the words for it, only knowing that time was running out. The snow continued to fall, relentless and silent, burying promises and footsteps alike. Whatever had been said earlier that day, whatever assurances had been offered, no longer mattered. The promise had not returned, and the cold did not care why. On the frozen bench, a small boy and a young dog clung to each other as night edged closer, the world holding its breath, unaware of how close it stood to losing them both. Lucas Bennett had learned to run not for speed, but for silence. The park's looping path cut through bare trees and iron benches like a scar, and he followed it with measured breath, boots crunching softly against fresh snow. In his late 30s, Lucas carried himself with a compact, disciplined economy of movement. Broad shoulders held square, spine straight despite the weight of years he rarely spoke about. His face was weathered in a way that came less from age than from exposure. Windburned skin, a strong jaw shadowed by a short stubble he never bothered to shave clean, a faint scar at the corner of his right eyebrow that tugged his expression into something permanently alert. His hair, cut close and practical, was dark with threads of gray already creeping in. People often mistook his stillness for coldness, but those who knew him understood it differently. Lucas had learned through war and loss that emotions were safest when kept contained. He ran most evenings, especially when the weather turned hostile. Snowstorms were the worst and the best of it. The worst because they carried echoes. Whiteouts in foreign deserts, radios crackling with half-heard orders, the sickening quiet that followed explosions. The best because pain sharpened focus, and focus kept memories at bay. Tonight the snow fell thick, muting the city and pressing the world into a smaller, quieter shape. Lucas welcomed that. He was midway through the park loop when something disrupted the rhythm of his breath. Not a sound, more a shape where there should have been none. He slowed instinctively, eyes narrowing against the swirl of white. Ahead, barely visible through the snowfall, was a bench with a low mound of snow that looked wrong, too deliberate, too human. Lucas veered off the path. As he drew closer, the mound resolved into two forms locked together. A child, a dog. The sight struck him with sudden, brutal clarity, the way certain images did when they bypassed thought and went straight to memory. His chest tightened, pulse spiking. He stopped running. The boy was slumped against the back of the bench, head tilted to one side, eyes closed. He was small, too small to be out here alone, his coat several sizes too big, sleeves hanging limp past his hands. His face was pale to the point of translucence, lips faintly blue. Pressed against him was a young German shepherd, legs awkwardly folded, body curved protectively around the child. The dog's coat was matted with snow, ears drooping with exhaustion, but his eyes were open, locked on Lucas, with wary intensity. Lucas moved carefully, hands visible, posture low. "Hey," he said softly, voice roughened by cold and disuse. The dog growled, not aggressive, but defensive. A low warning rumble from deep in his chest. Lucas understood that sound. He'd heard it before in other contexts, other lives. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt him." He crouched beside the bench, close enough to see the boys. Shallow breathing, far enough not to startle the dog. The child's name tag dangled from the zipper of his coat, letters smeared but readable. Ethan. The dog's tag read Rex. Lucas swallowed. Names made things real. Names demanded action. He slipped off his gloves and pressed 2 fingers gently to Ethan's neck. The pulse was there, but slow, thready. Hypothermia. Severe. Lucas's training snapped into place, a familiar clarity replacing the spike of fear. He shrugged out of his heavy running jacket, a dark insulated shell worn thin at the elbows, and draped it around Ethan's shoulders, tucking it close. The boy stirred faintly, a soft sound escaping his lips, but did not wake. Rex whined, shifting as Lucas adjusted the jacket, but did not snap. The dog's instincts were good. He recognized urgency when he saw it. Lucas met Rex's gaze and nodded once, as if sealing a pact. "I've got him," he said quietly. "You did good." Lucas slid one arm beneath Ethan's knees and the other behind his back, lifting him carefully. The boy weighed almost nothing. That, more than anything, made Lucas's jaw clench. He adjusted his grip, pressing Ethan against his chest to share body heat, and began moving toward the park entrance. Snow fell harder now, wind pushing it sideways, visibility dropping. Rex struggled to his feet and followed, limping slightly, paws raw and red from cold, but determined. Every few steps he bumped against Lucas's leg, as if checking that Ethan was still there. The walk to the street felt longer than it was. Lucas's breath came hard, muscles burning, but he welcomed the pain. It anchored him in the present. He reached the curb, fumbled for his phone with numb fingers, and called emergency services, voice steady, clipped, precise. He gave coordinates, condition, details. Years of command training surfaced effortlessly. Help was on the way, but time was still a factor. He carried Ethan into the vestibule of a closed cafe to shield him from the wind. The glass rattled softly. Lucas knelt, wrapping his jacket tighter, rubbing Ethan's hands gently to stimulate circulation. "Stay with me, kid," he murmured. Words meant more for himself than for the child. Memories threatened at the edges. Faces he'd carried once before, bodies that had gone still despite his efforts. But he pushed them down. This was different. This was now. Rex lay down beside them, head resting near Ethan's feet, eyes never leaving Lucas. Despite exhaustion, the dog remained alert, chest rising and falling fast. Lucas reached out and checked Rex's paws quickly, noting the damage, the tremor in his legs. "You're hurting too," he said quietly. "We'll get you help." The sirens arrived at last, distant then near, cutting through the storm with sharp urgency. Paramedics rushed in, faces serious, movements efficient. One of them, a woman in her 40s with a square jaw and streaks of gray in her dark hair tucked beneath her. Cap knelt beside Lucas, eyes assessing Ethan with practiced speed. She asked questions. Lucas answered them all. The dog was loaded too, wrapped in a thermal blanket, still watching Ethan even as they were separated. As they moved Ethan onto the stretcher, his eyes fluttered open for a moment. He looked confused, frightened, gaze unfocused, until he found Rex. His small hand lifted weakly. "Rex," he whispered, voice barely sound. Lucas caught the word, felt it lodge somewhere deep and painful. "He's coming with you," Lucas said firmly, leaning close so Ethan could hear. "I promise." The ambulance doors closed, sirens wailing as it pulled away into the snow. Lucas stood there for a moment, chest heaving, snow melting into his hair and beard. The park lay quiet again, as if nothing had happened. But Lucas knew better. Some nights changed things. Some footsteps led somewhere you couldn't walk back from. He pulled on his gloves slowly, eyes following the ambulance's fading lights, and understood, without needing to name it, that he would not be able to forget this night, even if he wanted to. The ambulance cut through the storm with its siren wailing like a living thing, red lights splintering against the falling snow, as if the night itself were breaking apart. Lucas Bennett sat forward on the narrow bench inside, knees braced, one hand gripping the rail above him, the other hovering near Ethan without touching, afraid that even the smallest interference might disrupt the fragile work unfolding in front of him. The interior smelled of antiseptic and cold metal, sharp and clean, a scent that dragged him backward through years he rarely allowed himself to revisit. Ethan lay strapped to the stretcher, wrapped in layered thermal blankets, his small chest rising unevenly beneath them. His skin was still frighteningly pale, lips dry and faintly blue, eyelashes clumped together with melted snow and tears he no longer had the strength to shed. Across from him, a paramedic named Karen Holt worked with calm efficiency. She was a woman in her early 40s, tall and solidly built, her posture confident and grounded, like someone who had learned long ago how to stay steady in chaos. Her brown hair was pulled into a tight braid tucked beneath her cap, streaked with early gray that spoke of long nights and hard winters. Her face was square and open, skin weathered by years of emergency calls in brutal conditions, eyes sharp but not unkind. Karen spoke little, but when she did, her voice carried authority without cruelty. She checked Ethan's vitals again, adjusted the oxygen mask, and nodded to herself, not reassurance, but acknowledgement of a fight still ongoing. "Severe hypothermia," she said aloud, more for record than conversation, "but he's holding, barely." Lucas exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. He had heard those words before, spoken over different bodies in different places, often followed by silence. He shifted his gaze to the opposite stretcher where Rex lay, wrapped in a reflective emergency blanket, only his head visible. The German shepherd's ears drooped with exhaustion, his eyes glassy but alert, tracking Ethan's every movement. One paw was bandaged quickly and roughly, blood seeping faintly through the gauze. Rex's breathing was rapid, shallow but steady, alive, still fighting. The ambulance lurched as it hit a patch of ice, and Lucas instinctively reached out, steadying himself, heart pounding. His hands were shaking now, not from the cold. He barely felt that anymore, but from the familiar tightening in his chest, the weight of memories pressing in. He remembered children in foreign villages, faces gray with dust and fear, carried through smoke and noise. He remembered being too late. He remembered the sound a body made when it stopped being a body and became something else entirely. Those memories had shaped him, carved him into someone who ran through snowstorms instead of sleeping through quiet nights. The doors burst open at the hospital bay, cold air rushing in as staff moved fast, practiced, efficient. Ethan was wheeled out first, hands already moving to transfer him to warmed equipment. Lucas followed until a nurse blocked his path gently but firmly. "We've got him," she said. You need to wait here." Her face was young, freckled, voice kind but unyielding. Lucas nodded once, stepping back, fists clenching at his sides as the stretcher disappeared through swinging doors. Rex was taken next, carried by a veterinary tech summoned from the attached animal emergency unit. The tech, a slender man in his late 20s with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous energy, murmured reassurances to the dog as if Rex could understand every word. Rex did not resist. His eyes searched the room until they found Lucas again. Their gazes locked for a brief moment, something unspoken passing between them. Recognition, gratitude, maybe trust. Then Rex too was gone. The waiting room was warm to the point of discomfort, the sudden contrast making Lucas feel disoriented. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The walls were painted a neutral beige meant to soothe, but doing little of the sort. Lucas stood instead of sitting, pacing a short line between two chairs. His broad shoulders were tense beneath his damp shirt, hair darkened by melted snow, stubble rough against skin he kept rubbing unconsciously as if to ground himself. Around him, time stretched again, but this time it was thick with dread instead of cold. He replayed the night in his head, every decision scrutinized. Had he moved fast enough, wrapped Ethan tightly enough, missed any sign? His training told him he had done everything right, but training had never silenced doubt before. The faces of children he could not save hovered at the edge of his vision, ghosts tugging at his focus. He closed his eyes briefly, inhaled deeply, and forced himself back into the present. This was not the desert. This was not war. This was a hospital in Montana, and the boy was alive when they arrived. That had to count for something. Hours seemed to pass, though the clock suggested far less. Finally, a doctor approached, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and tired eyes behind rectangular glasses. His white coat hung loosely on a frame that had learned the weight of bad news. Lucas straightened instinctively. "He's stable," the doctor said. "Critical but stable. We're rewarming him slowly. Another hour like the one he had out there and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "You got him here in time." Lucas's breath left him in a rush he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His knees felt weak for a moment and he leaned a hand against the wall, nodding. "Can I see him?" he asked. "In a bit," the doctor replied, "when he's more responsive." "And the dog?" Lucas asked immediately. The doctor smiled faintly. "The dog's a fighter, frostbite on the paws, dehydration, exhaustion, but he'll recover." Lucas closed his eyes then, just for a second. This time, the memories did not claw so hard. This time, there was no finality. No body bag. No folded flag. When Ethan finally woke, it was slowly, confusion clouding his small face as his eyes adjusted to the light. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, humming softly. His hands twitched weakly, fingers curling as if searching for something. "Rex," he whispered, voice thin and cracked. Lucas was there before anyone else could answer. He stepped to the bedside, lowering himself so he was level with the child. "He's okay," Lucas said gently, his voice rough with emotion he no longer bothered to hide. "He's right here in the hospital. You did good. You both did." Ethan's eyes focused on Lucas, fear flickering, then softening, his small hand lifted, hovering uncertainly. Lucas hesitated only a second before taking it, his large, calloused fingers closing carefully around the fragile warmth of Ethan's palm. The boy sighed, eyelids fluttering, comforted by the certainty of touch. For the first time that night, Lucas felt something loosen in his chest. Not victory, not relief, something quieter, redemption perhaps, or the fragile beginning of it. The snow returned softly the morning Ethan was moved out of intensive care, falling in slow, unhurried flakes that dusted the hospital windows and turned the world outside pale and quiet again. Lucas Bennett stood beside the bed, hands in the pockets of his worn jacket, watching the rise and fall of Ethan's chest with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust peace until it proved itself. Ethan looked smaller here than he had on the bench, swallowed by white sheets and wires, color finally returning to his cheeks, but leaving him fragile, like glass warmed too quickly after cold. His dark hair lay flattened against his forehead, and when his eyes opened, they searched the room instinctively, not for machines or nurses, but for the familiar shape that had kept him alive. "Rex?" he asked, voice still thin but stronger than before. Lucas answered by stepping aside. Rex lay on a padded mat near the bed, one front paw wrapped neatly in a fresh bandage, his black and tan coat brushed and cleaned but still bearing the signs of exhaustion. He lifted his head immediately, ears perking, despite the droop that fatigue had carved into them, tail thumping once against the floor. Ethan smiled, a small, hesitant curve of relief. And the tension Lucas hadn't known he was carrying eased just a fraction. The days that followed unfolded quietly, without drama, but heavy with consequence. Social workers came and went, their questions gentle yet precise, notebooks always in hand. One of them, Marianne Cole, stood out to Lucas not because she was stern, but because she listened more than she spoke. She was in her early 50s, tall and slender, with silver-streaked blonde hair worn in a practical bun and pale skin that freckled easily in winter. Her eyes were a calm gray, observant without judgment, and her voice carried the measured patience of someone who had learned that broken stories revealed themselves only when given time. She spoke to Ethan at eye level, never rushing him, and when she spoke to Lucas, she did so plainly, without assumptions. The facts emerged slowly. Thomas Miller had not called, had not come. Hospital records showed no inquiries. Days passed, then weeks, and the silence hardened into something unmistakable. The promise had not simply been broken, it had been abandoned. Lucas found himself staying longer than necessary, first out of obligation, then out of something harder to define. He brought Ethan picture books, sat through cartoons he pretended not to understand, learned which foods Ethan could stomach and which made him grimace. He listened when Ethan spoke in fragments about the bench, about the cold, about waiting. Lucas did not interrupt or correct. He let the boy speak the way survivors often did, circling the truth rather than stepping straight into it. At night, when the ward quieted, Lucas sometimes caught himself staring at the window, watching snow fall and feeling the weight of choice settle over him, like another layer of winter. Rex healed steadily, strength returning to his long legs, curiosity rekindling in cautious bursts. He followed Lucas everywhere he was allowed, moving with a loyalty that was not loud but constant. The veterinary tech explained that Rex was still young, resilient, likely to make a full recovery. Lucas nodded, rubbing the dog's ears absent-mindedly, already understanding that Rex was no longer just a responsibility tied to Ethan's case. He was part of the story now, part of whatever came next. The decision, when it finally came, did not feel sudden. It felt inevitable. Lucas stood in Marianne Cole's office, snow tapping against the window, and spoke the words carefully, as if saying them too quickly might make them fragile. He wanted to be Ethan's guardian. He wanted to adopt him. Marianne studied him for a long moment, assessing not just the statement but the man making it. The broad shoulders held stiff with uncertainty, the scarred eyebrow, the hands that had learned to be gentle after years of force. "This isn't simple," she said, not unkindly. Lucas nodded. "I know." He spoke then of the bench, of the dog, of the moment Ethan reached for Rex before anything else. He did not speak of redemption or destiny. He spoke only of staying. The process took time, background checks, interviews, paperwork that piled up like snowdrifts. Lucas endured it all with the patience of someone who had waited for worse things. Ethan moved into a temporary foster placement while the legal steps advanced. But Lucas visited every day, sometimes twice. He brought Rex, who bounded through the door each time as if afraid the boy might vanish if he didn't reach him fast enough. Ethan began to sleep through the night. He laughed more easily. He learned to trust the sound of footsteps returning. Months later, when the adoption was finalized, winter had loosened its grip. Snow melted into muddy edges, and the park, where it had all begun, revealed itself again, ordinary, quiet, harmless in daylight. Lucas brought Ethan there one afternoon, Rex trotting proudly between them, leash slack. Ethan stood for a long moment by the bench, smaller than it had once seemed, then turned away without looking back. Some places did not need revisiting. Years passed. Ethan grew into his limbs, then into his confidence. Lucas learned how to braid hair for school mornings, how to listen without fixing, how to show up consistently rather than dramatically. Rex aged into his strength, becoming steady and calm, a constant presence at Ethan's side. The three of them built a life measured not by grand gestures, but by routine. Dinners, walks, quiet nights, when snow fell gently outside and no one was left alone. People in town remembered the story, told it now and then when winter returned. They spoke of a boy on a frozen bench, of a loyal dog, of a soldier who appeared out of the storm. Lucas never corrected them, never embellished. He knew the truth was simpler and harder. Families were not always born of blood. Sometimes they were born of choice, of staying when leaving would have been easier. And in that understanding, forged on a winter night, a family had quietly come into being. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, on tired legs, through falling snow, in the form of a stranger who chooses to stop when the world keeps moving. That winter night, Ethan didn't just survive the cold. He was found. Rex didn't just protect a child. He became a bridge between despair and hope. And Lucas didn't just save a life. He answered a calling he didn't know he was still listening for. Maybe God didn't part the storm. Maybe he sent someone through it. In our everyday lives, we often pray for miracles while walking past the very moments where we could be one. A kind word, a pause, a choice to stay when leaving would be easier. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you that no one is truly invisible, and no act of compassion is ever wasted. Someone out there may be waiting on a bench of their own, hoping for warmth, hoping for help, hoping for proof that they matter. Please take a moment to share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And if stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances speak to you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. May God bless you and protect you. May He guide your steps, soften your heart, and give you the strength to be someone else's miracle when the moment comes. Thank you for being here.